I'm Leon, 32 years old, and a successful real estate developer. After years of hard work, I bought my first investment property, a beautiful 4-bedroom house in my hometown. When my parents needed a place to stay during their home renovation, I generously offered them my house rent-free for 3 months. During a surprise visit 6 months later, I discovered something unbelievable. My key no longer worked in the door. Before I tell you how my own family locked me out of my house, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if family betrayal stories make your blood boil too. Growing up in Mapleton, a modest Midwestern town with just under 15,000 residents, my childhood was comfortable, but not extravagant. My parents, Harold and Martha, were hardworking people who provided the necessities, but struggled with financial planning. Dad worked at the local manufacturing plant, while Mom taught 3rd grade at the elementary school. We lived in a small 3-bedroom ranch house that always seemed to need repairs they couldn't quite afford. From an early age, I noticed how money was a constant source of tension in our household. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, and hushed arguments about finances became the soundtrack of my teenage years. My sister Rebecca, 2 years younger than me, somehow remained oblivious to these struggles. While I worked part-time jobs since age 16, saving every penny I could, Rebecca was encouraged to focus on being social and enjoying her youth. This difference in expectations created an undeniable dynamic in our family. My parents seemed to believe that Rebecca needed protection and support, while I was expected to be self-sufficient. When college applications rolled around, I applied for every scholarship possible, ultimately piecing together enough financial aid to attend state university, supplemented by student loans and a part-time job at the campus bookstore. Those college years were brutal. I'd wake at 5 in the morning to shelve books before classes, attend lectures all day, then work evening shifts at a local restaurant. Weekends weren't for partying. They were for picking up extra shifts and cramming study sessions into whatever hours remained. While my classmates complained about hangovers, I worried about making rent and maintaining my GPA for scholarship eligibility. Meanwhile, Rebecca attended community college briefly, before dropping out, continuing to live at home rent-free. My parents never pushed her to find direction or independence. When she started dating Jason in her early 20s, they welcomed him into their home too, despite his spotty employment history and tendency to quit jobs whenever they became too stressful. After graduating with a business degree and a focus in real estate development, I secured an entry-level position at Horizon Development Group in Chicago. The starting salary was modest, but the opportunity for growth was significant. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, with furniture salvaged from curbs and thrift stores, maintaining the frugal lifestyle of my college years, despite finally earning a steady paycheck. Over the next 8 years, I worked tirelessly to climb the corporate ladder. Promotions came through long hours and consistent results. I volunteered for challenging projects, relocated temporarily to struggling developments, and built a reputation as the guy who could turn properties around. By the time I turned 30, I'd been promoted to senior development manager, overseeing multiple multi-million-dollar projects across the Midwest. Throughout these years, I maintained my disciplined approach to finances. While colleagues purchased luxury cars and downtown condos, I drove a reliable used sedan and continued living modestly. My focus remained on building wealth through careful investments, rather than displaying it through possessions. After accumulating sufficient savings, I decided it was time to begin building my own real estate portfolio separate from my career. I researched markets extensively, looking for the right combination of affordability, growth potential, and management feasibility. Somewhat surprisingly, analysis led me back to my hometown, where housing prices remained reasonable, while the job market had improved through new manufacturing investments. The 4-bedroom colonial-style house on Maple Street represented my first personal investment property. Built in the 1970s but renovated in the early 2000s, it featured hardwood floors, updated bathrooms, and a spacious backyard with mature trees. Located in a stable neighborhood near good schools, it had strong rental potential for families. I purchased it for $320,000, putting down 25% from my savings. My plan was simple, but sound: rent the property to reliable tenants, use the income to cover the mortgage while building equity, then leverage that equity for additional property investments within 5 years. I'd visited the property several times during the purchasing process, meticulously inspecting every detail and planning potential improvements that would increase its value. Just as I was preparing to list the property for rent, my mother called with news that their house had suffered significant water damage from a burst pipe. Their insurance would cover temporary housing costs, but Mom complained about the hotel options being too small and impersonal. Hearing the stress in her voice, I offered what seemed like a perfect solution. They could stay in my newly purchased house while their home was repaired rent-free for 3 months. "This would be such a blessing, Leon," my mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "You know how your father hates hotels, and this way we could be comfortable while the contractors fix everything." I was clear about the terms. "The insurance money you would have spent on a hotel can go toward your deductible instead." "But Mom, this is a temporary arrangement. 3 months maximum. I need to get paying tenants in there by summer." "Of course, sweetheart. The contractor said 6 to 8 weeks for the repairs, so 3 months gives us plenty of time. We'll treat the place like it's our own." That phrase would later come back to haunt me. We drafted a simple agreement, stating they could occupy the property rent-free for 3 months, after which they would either begin paying market-rate rent or vacate. Both my parents signed it with my father, commenting that such formality wasn't necessary between family. I insisted, explaining that clear expectations prevent misunderstandings. If only I'd known how prophetic those words would be. They moved in that February, and I returned to Chicago feeling good about helping my family, while also ensuring my investment property wouldn't sit vacant. In retrospect, I should have recognized the dangerous combination I'd created. My financially irresponsible parents, my dependent sister, and her unemployed husband, and my unoccupied house, all within the same small town where I was, hundreds of miles away. March and April passed without incident. Our weekly phone calls followed a predictable pattern. Mom would detail the neighborhood gossip, Dad would grumble about the contractors taking too long with their house repairs, and I'd update them on my latest work projects. These conversations always ended with vague assurances that everything at my house was just fine and that I didn't need to worry about a thing. By early May, subtle changes in our communication began to emerge. When I mentioned planning a visit over Memorial Day weekend, Mom quickly discouraged me. "Oh, honey, that's not a good time," she said, her voice oddly pitched. "The neighborhood will be so busy with the holiday parade and festivities. You'd hate the traffic." This seemed strange. I'd always enjoyed the town's Memorial Day celebrations. When I suggested coming the following weekend instead, Dad jumped on the line with a different excuse. "The weather's been terrible, son. Rainy and miserable. Wait until summer, when you can enjoy the backyard properly." These deterrents continued through June. Each time I proposed visiting, they crafted increasingly elaborate reasons why that particular weekend wouldn't work. Meanwhile, other peculiarities crept into our interactions. During one call, I distinctly heard children laughing in the background. "Is someone visiting?" I asked casually. "Just the neighbor's kids," Mom replied too quickly. "They're playing in their yard next door." Another time, Dad abruptly ended our call when I heard what sounded like a power tool in the background. "Gotta go, Leon. The TV is too loud." Video calls became impossible to arrange. "The internet's acting up," they claimed, or "the lighting is terrible in this house." Each excuse seemed minor in isolation, but formed a troubling pattern when viewed collectively. My suspicions grew when I reviewed my credit card statement in early July. Though I'd given my parents permission to use my card for minor house-related purchases, I noticed charges at Home Depot and Lowe's totaling nearly $2,000 over the past 3 months. When questioned, Dad vaguely mentioned fixing a few things and promised to send receipts that never materialized. These financial discoveries coincided with updates about their original home's renovation. What had initially been estimated as an 8-week project was apparently facing continuous delays. The contractor found black mold, Mom explained during one call. Then, there were issues with the permits. Now they're saying the electrical needs completely redoing. It's just one thing after another. Each setback extended their stay in my house now, well beyond the agreed-upon 3 months, with no mention of when they might leave or begin paying rent. Whenever I gently broached the subject, they deflected with comments about their mounting renovation costs, or changed the topic entirely. The definitive red flag appeared in mid-July through a completely unexpected source. My credit card company called to verify several large furniture purchases at a local store in my hometown. I hadn't authorized these charges, and immediately had them flagged as fraudulent. When I called my parents to warn them someone might be using my card number, Dad confessed they had made the purchases to replace some damaged items in the house. "You should have discussed this with me first," I said, frustration evident in my voice. "Those charges were nearly $3,000. "We were going to tell you," Mom interjected. "We just wanted to surprise you with the improvements. The old furniture was so outdated." The furniture I had carefully selected just months earlier was hardly outdated, but I swallowed my irritation, choosing instead to establish firmer boundaries. No more large purchases without discussing them with me first. Okay, this is still my investment property. Their agreement came too readily, which should have been another warning sign. The final catalyst for my unannounced visit came through a chance social media encounter. An old high school classmate, Melissa, who still lived in Mapleton, posted a community update that mentioned the Sanderson kids causing a commotion at the public pool. Sanderson is my last name, but I don't have children, and as far as I knew, neither did Rebecca. I messaged Melissa privately, asking casually about her post. Her response chilled me. "Oh, your sister's kids. They're quite the handful at the pool. The little boy, Tommy is it, pushed my daughter into the deep end last week. Your sister apologized, but maybe someone should watch them more closely." I sat at my desk, staring at this message in disbelief. Rebecca has kids since when? And why would Melissa think they lived in Mapleton? As far as I knew, my sister and Jason had been living in Riverdale, a city about 40 miles away, though we rarely communicated directly. A quick search of Rebecca's social media confirmed she had 2 children, a 7-year-old boy named Thomas and a 9-year-old girl named Emma. How had I not known this? Our family's communication had always been compartmentalized, with my parents serving as information gatekeepers. But this seemed like a significant detail to omit. Pieces began falling into place with alarming implications. The children's voices in the background of calls, the furniture purchases, the resistance to my visits, the continuously delayed renovation of my parents' house. With growing certainty, I suspected my parents had moved my sister's entire family into my house, without my knowledge or permission. I needed to see for myself. Without announcing my intentions, I requested 2 personal days from work, packed an overnight bag, and began the 5-hour drive from Chicago to Mapleton early Thursday morning. As I drove, my mind cycled through possible explanations, each attempt at an innocent interpretation, crumbling under the weight of accumulated evidence. The rational part of me said I was overreacting. Surely my own parents wouldn't deceive me so deliberately. The pragmatic part knew they absolutely would, especially if they believed they were helping Rebecca. The familiar landmarks of my hometown did little to calm my growing anxiety. Driving through downtown Mapleton, I noticed new businesses and construction that highlighted how infrequently I visited. Turning onto Maple Street, my suspicions immediately found confirmation. The property I'd purchased, my investment, my future, looked markedly different. The simple landscaping I'd paid a service to maintain had been transformed with elaborate flower beds and decorative borders. A basketball hoop stood in the driveway. Colorful children's bicycles lay scattered across the front lawn. and parked behind my parents' familiar sedan was a blue minivan I didn't recognize. My stomach clenched as I pulled to the curb, the reality of the situation impossible to deny. Someone else was living in my house, and I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering my composure and observing the property that legally belonged to me yet suddenly felt foreign. Through the front windows I could see movement. Multiple people inside a house that should have contained only my parents. With a deep breath, I grabbed my keys and approached the front door. The key slid into the lock but wouldn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it gently, then with more force, but the mechanism remained immovable. Confusion gave way to a cold realization. The locks had been changed. I stood on the porch of my own property, locked out and seething. I pressed the doorbell, hearing its unfamiliar chime echo through the house. Even that had been changed. Footsteps approached, followed by the sound of the security chain being engaged before the door opened, just a few inches. My mother's face appeared in the gap, her expression shifting from annoyance to shock when she recognized me. "Leon, what are you doing here?" Her voice carried forced cheerfulness that couldn't mask her panic. "Surprise visit to check on my property," I replied evenly. "Mind letting me in? My key doesn't seem to work anymore." She glanced anxiously over her shoulder before responding. "This isn't a good time, honey. The house is a mess, and we weren't expecting company." "I'm not company, Mom. I'm the owner of this house. Open the door." Her hesitation spoke volumes. "Harold," she called behind her. "Leon's here." My father appeared behind her, his face carefully arranged into a welcoming smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Son, what brings you all the way from Chicago without calling first?" "My key doesn't work," I repeated, holding it up. "Care to explain why the locks have been changed on my property?" They exchanged glances before Dad reluctantly closed the door, removed the security chain, and reopened it fully. Neither moved aside to let me enter. "We had a small security issue," Dad explained. "Someone tried to break in last month, so we changed the locks for safety. We were going to send you the new keys. When it's been a month, according to your story," I stepped forward, forcing them to back up and allow me inside. "And why does the doorbell sound different too?" The interior of my house struck me like a physical blow. What had been a tastefully decorated investment property, with neutral colors and minimal furnishings, had transformed into something unrecognizable. The walls, formerly light gray, were now painted a bold blue in the entryway and sunflower yellow in the living room. Family photos I'd never seen adorned the walls, and unfamiliar furniture filled the space. "What happened here?" I demanded, turning in a slow circle to take in the changes. "This looks nothing like the house I bought." Before either parent could respond, a young boy, around 7 years old, ran into the room. "Grandma, can I have?" He stopped abruptly when he saw me, his eyes widening with curiosity. "Who are you?" "Tommy, go upstairs and play with your sister," my mother instructed urgently. "Tommy, my nephew, in my house. I think I deserve some answers," I said quietly, the calm in my voice belying the anger building inside me. "Where's Rebecca?" As if summoned by her name, my sister appeared from the kitchen, freezing when she saw me. Behind her stood a man I vaguely recognized as Jason, her husband, from social media photos. His hand rested protectively on her shoulder. "Leon," Rebecca said, her voice small. "We didn't know you were coming." Clearly. I looked between all four adults, standing awkwardly before me. Would someone like to explain why my sister, her husband, and their children are living in my house? A house that I only authorized our parents to use temporarily. An uncomfortable silence fell before my father stepped forward, adopting the authoritative tone he'd used throughout my childhood when explaining why something was for the best. "Son, It's a complicated situation. Rebecca and Jason lost their apartment in Riverdale. We didn't lose it. Jason interrupted defensively. The landlord was unreasonable about the noise complaints and the late payments. They needed somewhere to stay. Mom continued shooting Jason an irritated glance. It was only supposed to be for a few weeks, until they found a new place. When did they move in? I asked already, suspecting the answer. Rebecca looked at the floor. March. March, I repeated flatly. So almost immediately after I let you two move in, I gestured to my parents. And no one thought I should know about this. We were going to tell you, Mom insisted, wringing her hands. But we knew you'd be upset and we wanted to wait until we had good news about Rebecca and Jason finding their own place. Or about your house repairs being completed, I challenged. How's that coming along? The guilty exchange of glances between my parents confirmed another suspicion. There's no ongoing renovation at your house, is there? Dad sighed, dropping the pretense. We had water damage, but it was repaired months ago. We just thought. Well, it seemed wasteful to have this big house sitting empty when Rebecca needed help. So you lied to me. For 5 months. All of you. I looked around the transformed space again, noticing more details. Custom curtains, new light fixtures. A large flat-screen television that certainly hadn't been there before. And you've been renovating my property without permission. We've improved it. Jason stepped forward, chest puffing slightly. The appliances were outdated, the paint colors were boring, and the yard needed landscaping. We've added value to your investment. With whose money, I demanded. Well, yours initially, my father admitted. But we've been paying for things too. And Jason did most of the labor himself. A child's voice called from upstairs. Mom, Tommy won't give back my tablet. Not now. Emma Rebecca shouted back, her face flushing. I sank onto an unfamiliar sofa, trying to process the scope of this deception. So let me understand this correctly. You've all been living here for 5 months. You've made extensive, unauthorized changes to my property. You've been using my credit card for purchases. You changed the locks without telling me. And none of you thought I deserved to know any of this. When you put it like that, it sounds bad. Rebecca said, tears forming in her eyes. But we had nowhere else to go. The kids needed stability, and the school district here is so much better than where we could afford to rent. We're family, Leon. My mother added, sitting beside me and touching my arm. I pulled away immediately. Family helps each other. You have this whole house just sitting here as an investment, while your sister needed a home for her children. Their attempts to make me feel guilty only fueled my anger. This isn't about family helping family. This is about respect and honesty. You all conspired to take advantage of my property without my knowledge or consent. That's not help. That's exploitation. That's a harsh word, Dad said, frowning. We've been maintaining the place, making improvements that I didn't ask for or approve. I stood up, unable to remain still. I had specific plans for this property. It was going to be a cornerstone of my investment portfolio. I need reliable rental income from this house, not unauthorized renovations and family squatters. Jason stepped forward, his expression hardening. Squatters. Is that what you think we are? We've put thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours into making this place better. For yourselves, I retorted. Not for me. Not for my investment purposes. You decided my property was yours to use however you wanted. What exactly do you want from us? Leon, Rebecca asked, tears now streaming down her face. We have nowhere else to go. The kids are settled in school here. Tommy finally has friends in the neighborhood. Would you really make your own niece and nephew homeless? And there it was. The manipulation tactic I should have anticipated. Make me the villain for enforcing reasonable boundaries. Cast me as the heartless uncle prioritizing money over family. You have 30 days to find alternative housing, I said firmly. All of you. I'm giving formal notice now. I'll be back tomorrow with written documentation." My parents and sister exchanged alarmed looks. 30 days isn't enough time, my father protested. "Be reasonable, son." "Reasonable," I laughed without humor. Reasonable would have been asking my permission before moving an entire additional family into my house. Reasonable would have been honest communication about your intentions. You've had 5 months of free housing through deception. 30 days to find alternatives is more than reasonable. "We're not leaving," Jason stated flatly, crossing his arms. "We've established residence here. We get mail here. The kids are registered for school with this address. You can't just throw us out." "Watch me," I replied, moving toward the door. "This is my property, and none of you have legal right to be here beyond my permission, which I'm formally revoking as of today." "Leon, please," my mother pleaded, following me to the door. "Let's discuss this calmly. Stay for dinner. We can work something out that benefits everyone. I'll be at the Hampton Inn tonight," I replied, stepping outside. "I suggest you all start packing and looking for new housing options. I expect this property returned to my control within 30 days. As I walked to my car, I heard Jason's voice behind me. He's bluffing. He won't actually evict his own family. How little they knew me. How little they understood that their betrayal had severed any obligation I might have felt toward them. As I drove away, I was already formulating my next steps. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about standing up against a lifetime of manipulation and disrespect. I spent a restless night at the Hampton Inn, alternating between rage, disbelief, and moments of doubt. Had I overreacted? Was I being unreasonable? By morning, however, my resolve had solidified. This wasn't about the specific changes they'd made to the house, though those unauthorized renovations represented a significant breach of trust. This was about a calculated months-long deception by my entire family. At 9 o'clock, I walked into the office of Patricia Lawson, a real estate attorney, whose name I'd found through a quick online search. Her office occupied a converted Victorian house downtown, the interior professionally appointed but welcoming. "So, your parents have been living in your investment property, with your permission." Patricia summarized after I explained my situation, "But they secretly moved your sister's family in, as well made substantial unauthorized changes to the property, and have been there for 5 months, total, well beyond your original 3-month agreement." "That's correct," I confirmed. "And they've changed the locks without providing me new keys." She tapped her pen thoughtfully. "Do you have documentation of your original agreement with your parents?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the signed document, stating the 3-month rent-free arrangement, followed by either vacation or commencement of market-rate rent. I also showed her the property deed and mortgage documents confirming my ownership. "This is straightforward from a legal perspective," Patricia said after reviewing everything. "It's your property. They have no lease. The original agreement with your parents has expired, and your sister's family never had permission to be there at all. You have every right to evict them. What's the process? You need to serve them with formal written notice to vacate. Typically, 30 days is standard for month-to-month or terminated agreements. If they don't comply, we file for eviction through the court. Given the circumstances, I'd recommend we prepare the paperwork immediately." She drafted a formal notice while I waited. The legal language clear and unambiguous. All current occupants were required to vacate the property at 1423 Maple Street within 30 days, with no option for extension. The document cited the expired agreement, unauthorized additional occupants, and unauthorized modifications to the property as grounds for termination. With the notices in hand, I drove back to my house, determined to deliver them formally and document the process. What I found when I arrived made my blood boil. A new deadbolt had been installed overnight, along with a security camera above the front door. The curtains were drawn on all windows. I pressed the doorbell repeatedly, then knocked loudly when no one answered. Finally, my father's voice came through a newly installed doorbell speaker. "Leon, we're not ready to talk yet. Everyone is too upset after yesterday. Give us some time to process. Open the door, Dad. I have legal documents to deliver to all of you. Slide them under the door if you want. We'll look at them later. That's not how legal notice works. Open the door now, or I'm calling the police to report that I'm being denied access to my own property." After a long pause, my mother's voice replaced my father's. "Honey, we all think it's best if you take some time to cool down. Family disagreements shouldn't involve threats of police or legal papers. This stopped being a family disagreement when you changed the locks on my house," I replied firmly. One last chance to open this door voluntarily. When no response came, I returned to my car and called the local police, non-emergency number. 20 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. Officer Ramirez, a middle-aged man with a patient demeanor, listened as I explained the situation, while his younger partner, Officer Collins, stood slightly behind him. "I understand your frustration, Sir," Officer Ramirez said after I finished. "But tenancy disputes can be complicated. Do you have proof of ownership with you?" I showed him the property documents on my phone along with the expired agreement with my parents. "And you say they've changed the locks and won't let you in?" "Correct. They installed a new deadbolt overnight specifically to keep me out." He nodded and approached the door, while I stayed by my car as requested. I watched as he rang the bell and had a conversation through the speaker, then waited as the door finally opened. My father spoke with the officers for several minutes, occasionally gesturing emphatically. I couldn't hear the conversation, but could read the increasingly concerned expressions on the officers' faces. When they returned to where I waited, Officer Ramirez's demeanor had changed. "Mr. Sanderson, your father has presented documentation showing they have established residency here, including utility bills in their names, school registration forms for the children, and mail delivery. He also claims they have a verbal agreement with you for long-term occupancy." "That's completely false," I protested. "I have the original written agreement right here with clear end dates." He's also shown us home improvement receipts and claims they've invested substantial money in the property with your knowledge and consent, creating an implied extension of their right to occupy. I felt ambushed. None of that was authorized. They used my credit card without permission for many of those purchases. Officer Collins spoke up. "Sir, this appears to be a civil matter at this point. Without a formal eviction order from the court, we can't force them to leave or give you access if they're claiming established tenancy. So they can just lock me out of my own property." "How is that legal?" "It's complicated," Officer Ramirez admitted. "I recommend you pursue this through proper legal channels. Your attorney can file for emergency access to the property if necessary." The officers left after advising me against attempting to force entry, warning that such actions could potentially result in charges against me despite my ownership. I stood in the street staring at my house, my investment, my property, now effectively stolen through manipulation and lies. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "We're willing to discuss this calmly when you're ready to be reasonable." The changes we've made have only improved the property's value. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove back to Patricia's office and explained the new developments. "They've clearly been planning this," she observed, her expression grim. "The immediate installation of additional security measures, the prepared documentation. This wasn't a spontaneous reaction." "What do we do now?" "We escalate. We'll file for an emergency hearing regarding your access rights as the property owner, then proceed with formal eviction proceedings. I should warn you, they might attempt to claim adverse possession or implied tenancy rights. It could get messy. I don't care. This is my property, and I want them out." Over the next few days, the situation deteriorated further. While staying at the hotel, I discovered my family had been systematically establishing themselves as the property's legitimate occupants for months. They had changed all utility bills into their names, redirected my property tax statements to my Chicago address, applied for and received multiple home improvement permits in my father's name, registered both children for school using the property address, joined the neighborhood association as the Sanderson family at 1,423 Maple. I also learned from neighbors that my parents and sister had been telling everyone that I had generously given them the house since I was doing so well in Chicago and never planned to return to Mapleton. Some neighbors seemed surprised to see me and responded coldly when I tried to explain the actual situation. Patricia filed our emergency motion for property access, but the earliest court date was still 2 weeks away. Meanwhile, I was forced to extend my hotel stay, taking additional time off work and watching my carefully constructed career momentum stall as I dealt with this family crisis. My phone filled with messages from various family members. My mother sent tearful voicemails about family loyalty and how hurt she was by my actions. My father's messages were stern lectures about respecting elders and putting family before money. Rebecca alternated between angry tirades about my selfishness and emotional appeals featuring my niece and nephew. Emma asked why Uncle Leon wants to make them homeless. One message read, accompanied by a photo of a sad-looking girl holding a crayon drawing of a family. How am I supposed to explain that to a 9-year-old? The manipulation was transparent, yet still effective in making me question myself. Was I the villain in this story? Was my insistence on property rights worth damaging these relationships permanently? These doubts would creep in during quiet moments, only to be washed away when I remembered the calculated deception that had brought us to this point. This wasn't just about a house. This was about respect, honesty, and boundaries, all of which my family had willfully violated. If I backed down now, I would be teaching them that such behavior was ultimately rewarded. That wasn't a lesson I was willing to reinforce. The date of our emergency hearing arrived with suffocating tension. I'd spent the intervening 2 weeks gathering evidence with Patricia's guidance, property documents, credit card statements, showing unauthorized purchases, text message histories, and photographs of the property before and after my daughter, family's occupation. We'd assembled a comprehensive timeline of deception that painted an undeniable picture of calculated exploitation. The county courthouse, an imposing brick building with classical columns, seemed to amplify my anxiety as I climbed its steps that morning. Patricia met me outside professional in a navy suit carrying a leather portfolio bulging with our documentation. Remember, she advised, as we walked through security, remain calm regardless of what they claim. Emotional outbursts won't help our case. In the hallway outside courtroom C, I spotted them. My entire family assembled like a united front. My parents sat stiffly on a bench, both dressed in clothing far more formal than their usual attire. My father had traded his customary jeans for pressed slacks, while my mother wore a conservative dress that suggested church attendance rather than a court hearing. Rebecca stood nearby holding her children's hands. Emma and Tommy had been dressed in their school uniforms, their hair neatly combed, presenting a picture of the wholesome family at risk of displacement. Jason, almost unrecognizable in a suit, and Ty conversed quietly with a man I assumed was their attorney. They all noticed me simultaneously. Tommy pointed and started to approach, only to be firmly pulled back by Rebecca. My mother's eyes filled with tears, while my father's expression hardened. No one spoke to me directly. Inside the courtroom, we took our places at opposite tables. Judge Eleanor Martinez, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed our filings before addressing the room. This is an emergency hearing regarding property access and preliminary eviction notice for the residents at 1423 Maple Street, she stated. I've reviewed the initial filings from both parties. Mr. Leon Sanderson claims ownership rights and seeks immediate access to his property, while Harold and Martha Sanderson, along with Rebecca and Jason Winters, claim established tenancy rights and dispute the eviction notice. Is this an accurate summary? Both attorneys confirmed the judge's understanding. She nodded and turned to Patricia. Counselor, please present your client's position. Patricia rose and methodically outlined our case. My clear ownership of the property. The limited 3-month agreement with my parents that had expired, the unauthorized addition of my sister's family, the substantial modifications made without consent, and finally, my complete lockout from my own property. Your Honor, this is not a standard landlord-tenant dispute, Patricia emphasized. This is a case of calculated deception and exploitation of family ties for personal gain. My client has been systematically denied access to property he legally owns and maintains financial responsibility for. The opposing attorney, Mr. Davidson, presented a very different narrative when his turn came. Your Honor, this case revolves around a family arrangement that Mr. Leon Sanderson is now attempting to revoke without reasonable notice. My clients have established clear residency at this property, with the implicit approval of the owner. They have invested significant personal funds in improving the property, have enrolled children in local schools, and have reasonably relied on the understanding that this arrangement was long-term. Where is this understanding documented? Judge Martinez asked, peering over her glasses. We have testimony regarding verbal agreements, Davidson replied less confidently, and the substantial property improvements demonstrate a mutual understanding that this was not a temporary arrangement. The judge's expression suggested skepticism. Let's examine the evidence directly. What followed was a methodical review of documents from both sides. My property deed and mortgage statements clearly established ownership. The signed 3-month agreement with my parents undermined their claim of an open-ended arrangement. Credit card statements revealed the extent of unauthorized purchases, while before and after photographs documented the substantial unauthorized changes to the property. My father testified that I had verbally extended their stay during phone conversations, a claim I categorically denied. My mother tearfully described how they had only been trying to help Rebecca's family through difficult times. Rebecca testified about the children's established lives in the local school and community, while Jason emphasized the sweat equity they'd invested in property improvements. Throughout their testimony, a pattern emerged. They consistently framed their actions as well-intentioned family support, rather than addressing the fundamental issues of permission, deception, and respect for property rights. They attempted to cast me as callous and materialistic, prioritizing an investment over family well-being. When my turn came to testify, I focused on the facts while Patricia guided my responses. Did you at any point give permission for your sister's family to move into the property? No, I did not. I was never informed of their presence until I discovered it myself 5 months after they had moved in. Did you authorize the substantial modifications made to the property? Absolutely not. The changes were made without my knowledge or consent, often using my credit card without permission. Have you been willing to work with your family on a transition plan? Yes. I provided 30 days' notice to vacate, which is standard and reasonable. Their response was to install additional locks and security cameras, specifically to prevent my access to my own property. Judge Martinez asked several clarifying questions throughout the proceedings, particularly focused on the timeline of events and communications. As the hearing progressed, her questions to my family became increasingly pointed, suggesting growing skepticism toward their claims. After 4 hours of testimony and evidence presentation, the judge called a brief recess before delivering her ruling. Those 15 minutes in the hallway were excruciating. My family huddled with their attorney at one end, while Patricia and I discussed potential outcomes at the other. When we reconvened, Judge Martinez delivered her decision with clinical precision. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony presented, this court finds the following. First, Leon Sanderson is the legal owner of the property in question with full rights of access and control. Second, the original agreement with Harold and Martha Sanderson was clearly limited to 3 months and has expired. Third, Rebecca and Jason Winters never had legal permission to occupy the property. Fourth, The modifications made to the property, while potentially valuable, were unauthorized and do not create ownership or tenancy rights. She continued addressing my family directly. The court orders immediate restoration of Leon Sanderson's access to his property. All locks must be returned to their original state or new keys provided to the owner by 5 p.m. today. All current occupants are given 30 days from today to vacate the premises completely. My sister began crying audibly while my father's face flushed with anger. The judge wasn't finished. Additionally, the court orders financial restitution for unauthorized credit card charges to be determined in a separate hearing if the parties cannot reach agreement privately. Any attempt to block the owner's access to his property moving forward may result in criminal charges for unlawful exclusion. This ruling is effective immediately. The gavel struck with finality, and just like that, the legal battle was won. The courtroom began to empty. But as I gathered my documents, my father approached, his voice low but intense. "This isn't over, Leon. You may have won in court, but you've lost your family. I hope this house is worth it to you." "This was never about the house, Dad," I replied calmly. "It was about respect and honesty, both of which you discarded when it suited you." He walked away without responding, joining my mother, who couldn't even look in my direction. As they exited, I overheard their attorney explaining in hushed tones that appealing would be futile and expensive. The judge's ruling was unambiguous. "You never had a strong legal position." Patricia touched my shoulder supportively. "That went as well as we could have hoped. Do you want police presence when you return to the property today?" I considered the question carefully. Yes, I think that would be prudent. I don't anticipate physical resistance, but emotions are running high. By 5 o'clock that evening, I stood on the porch of my house, truly my house again, with a police officer beside me as a locksmith changed the front door locks. Inside, my parents moved silently through rooms, avoiding eye contact. Rebecca and Jason had apparently taken the children elsewhere, unable or unwilling to face me after the court ruling. As I stepped across the threshold for the first time in weeks, reclaiming my property felt like both a victory and a loss. I had won back my house, but potentially lost my family in the process. The question that haunted me was whether they had ever truly respected me, or if I had just finally exposed a dynamic that had always existed beneath the surface. The following days established a new, uncomfortable reality. While I had legal access to my property again, it remained occupied by sullen family members who treated me like an intruder whenever I visited. I chose to continue staying at a hotel rather than sleep under the same roof with them, visiting daily to document the property's condition and monitor their packing progress. Rebecca and her family moved out first, relocating to an apartment in a neighboring town within 2 weeks of the court ruling. The children regarded me with confusion during this process, clearly having absorbed the narrative that I was the villain responsible for their displacement. Emma refused to speak to me at all, while Tommy asked innocently why I didn't love them enough to let them stay in the big house. These interactions were painful but reinforced my conviction that I'd made the right decision. My family had used these children as emotional pawns, teaching them that manipulation was an acceptable strategy, rather than honest communication and respect for boundaries. My parents remained until the final day of the 30-day period, seemingly determined to extract every possible moment of occupation from the court's ruling. I hired a professional cleaning company and 3 contractors to assess the property once they departed, wanting expert documentation of all changes they'd made. The walkthrough revealed a property transformed in ways both positive and problematic. Some modifications, like the updated kitchen appliances and bathroom fixtures, genuinely added value. Others, like the bold paint colors and customized children's rooms, would need to be reversed before the house could be marketed to potential tenants. The landscaping was beautiful, but would require professional maintenance far exceeding my original budget for the property. The contractors estimated the total cost to return the property to a neutral, tenant-ready condition at just over $15,000. This figure didn't include the previous unauthorized expenditures on my credit card, bringing the total financial impact close to $20,000. A substantial hit to my investment calculations. Patricia advised me that pursuing this amount through small claims court would likely be successful given the judge's previous ruling. But I found myself hesitating. The prospect of another courtroom confrontation with my family, more legal fees, and prolonged conflict weighed heavily against potential financial recovery. During this period of assessment, my father made one final attempt at justification. He arrived unannounced one afternoon while I was meeting with contractors, asking to speak privately on the back porch. "I know you think we betrayed you," he began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "But everything we did was with good intentions. Rebecca and the kids needed stability. The improvements we made only increased your property value." "Good intentions don't justify deception," I replied evenly. "You could have called me at any point during those 5 months and had an honest conversation. Instead, you chose to lie repeatedly and then tried to lock me out of my own property when discovered." "We were afraid you'd say no," he admitted. "You've always been so rigid about your plans. Sometimes family needs have to take precedence over financial strategies. That wasn't your decision to make with my property, Dad. And it's interesting that family needs always seem to prioritize Rebecca while expecting me to make all the sacrifices." His expression hardened. "That's unfair. We've always supported both of you." "Differently," I corrected. "You supported Rebecca by giving her whatever she wanted or needed, while you supported me by expecting self-sufficiency and independence. I'm not complaining about the skills that approach taught me, but don't pretend there hasn't always been a double standard." He had no response to this observation, and our conversation ended without resolution. He left without apologizing or acknowledging the fundamental breach of trust, seemingly unable to recognize that dimension of their actions. My mother's departure was more emotional, but equally devoid of genuine accountability. She cried while handing over the final set of keys, lamenting that money and property had come between us. When I pointed out that honesty and respect were the actual issues at stake, she seemed unable to process this perspective, locked into her narrative of familial obligation above all else. After they moved out completely, I spent a full week methodically documenting every aspect of the property. I photographed all modifications, inventoried new items versus original furnishings, and created a detailed assessment of what would need to be restored or replaced. This process was simultaneously infuriating and enlightening, revealing the full extent of their presumption in treating my investment as their own. Yet during this documentation process, unexpected emotions emerged. Some changes they'd made: a reading nook in the upstairs hallway, the vegetable garden in the backyard, the handcrafted shelving in the living room, showed genuine care and craftsmanship. Despite the violation of boundaries, they had in some ways treated the house with love, if not respect, for my ownership. These conflicting observations left me in a strange emotional limbo. I remained firm in my conviction that their actions had been fundamentally wrong, yet I couldn't summarily dismiss everything they'd done as malicious. The situation contained more complexity than I initially wanted to acknowledge. After considerable reflection and consultation with financial advisors, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would sell the property rather than rent it as originally planned. Despite the financial logic of keeping it as a long-term investment, I recognized that this house would always carry emotional baggage that would cloud my business judgment. Additionally, the Mapleton market had seen unexpected appreciation during the past year, creating an opportunity to sell at a profit despite the recent complications. I hired a professional staging company to prepare the house for sale, transforming it once again into a neutral, appealing property that bore little resemblance to either my original vision or my family's unauthorized renovation. Within 3 weeks of listing, I received multiple offers, ultimately accepting one significantly above my initial purchase price. The sale closed quickly, and I found myself in the unexpected position of having made a profit from what had been a painful ordeal. The financial outcome was positive, but the personal aftermath remained complicated and unresolved. Rebecca sent a text after learning of the sale. "I hope you're satisfied. The kids still ask about the house and don't understand why we had to leave. Some things are more important than money." I didn't respond. Her message confirmed that she still failed to understand the fundamental issues at stake, or chose not to acknowledge them. Either way, it demonstrated that meaningful reconciliation remained distant at best. With the property sold and legal matters concluded, I returned to Chicago with a mixture of relief, lingering anger, and unexpected clarity about both my financial priorities and family dynamics. The experience had been costly in multiple dimensions, but had also forced a reckoning that perhaps had been long overdue. 6 months passed swiftly after the sale of the Maple Street house. I reinvested the proceeds in 2 smaller properties in growing neighborhoods of Milwaukee and Indianapolis, deliberately choosing locations far from my hometown and family influences. These investments performed well, managed by professional property management companies with clear contracts and regular reports. No family complications, no emotional entanglements. During this period, I maintained complete silence with my parents and sister. The first month was difficult habit and conditioning, making me reach for my phone to call my mother on Sundays, as I always had. Each time I reminded myself of the calculated deception they had perpetrated and the complete lack of accountability they had shown even after being caught. The silence wasn't petty or punitive. It was protective. I needed time and space to process the experience without their justifications and emotional manipulations clouding my thinking. On the recommendation of a colleague who noticed my distraction at work, I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. "What you're describing is a classic family system with rigid roles," Dr. Brennan explained during one session. "You were assigned the role of the capable one, the independent one, while your sister was the needy one, the one who requires help. These roles become self-reinforcing over time, creating patterns that can be incredibly difficult to break. These insights helped me understand my family's behavior without excusing it. I recognized how my parents' different treatment of Rebecca and me had shaped both our personalities and expectations. I saw how my success had been used against me, twisted into an obligation to provide for others rather than celebrated as an achievement. Most importantly, I gained clarity about boundaries, what healthy ones looked like, why they mattered, and how to maintain them even when challenged by those claiming familial rights to cross them. As my perspective evolved, so did my professional life. The real estate development firm where I worked noticed my renewed focus and offered me an opportunity to lead a major new project in Denver. The promotion came with significant responsibility and a substantial salary increase, affirming that my career trajectory remained strong, despite the personal turmoil I'd experienced. Around the 4-month mark of our estrangement, my extended family began reaching out. My mother's sister, Aunt Catherine, called to understand both sides of what had happened. After listening to my account without judgment, she surprised me. "I love my sister, but what they did was wrong, Leon. Martha and Harold have always had blind spots where Rebecca is concerned, and it sounds like they took advantage of your generosity." This validation from a family member was unexpectedly healing. Catherine wasn't the only one. 2 cousins and an uncle expressed similar perspectives, suggesting that the entire extended family didn't share my parents' view of the situation. These conversations helped me feel less isolated and more confident in my position. In the 5th month, a letter arrived from Rebecca. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter. I let it sit unopened on my kitchen counter for 3 days, before finally reading it one Sunday morning over coffee. "Leon," she wrote, "I've spent months being angry with you for forcing us out of the house. I blamed you for the children's distress, at moving for our financial struggles, finding a new place for the strain on my marriage when Jason had to commute farther to his new job. It was easier to make you the villain than to acknowledge my own part in what happened. The truth is, I knew it was wrong from the beginning. When Mom and Dad suggested we move in without telling you, I had doubts but pushed them aside because it solved our problems so conveniently. Each time they made excuses about why they couldn't tell you yet, I went along with it. Each time we used your credit card for improvements, I rationalized it as eventually benefiting you too. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or to fix our relationship. I'm writing because I need to acknowledge my responsibility. What we did was wrong. We violated your trust and your property rights, then tried to make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself. I'm sorry. The letter continued with updates about her family. They'd found stable housing, Jason had secured better employment, and the children were adjusting well to their new school. She closed by saying she respected my decision to maintain distance and wouldn't expect a response. I didn't reply immediately, needing time to process this unexpected acknowledgement. When I finally did respond 2 weeks later, my message was brief but sincere. Thank you for your letter and honesty. It means more than you might realize. I'm glad to hear your family is doing well. This exchange didn't immediately repair our relationship, but it created an opening for potential healing in the future, something I hadn't thought possible during the height of the conflict. My parents, by contrast, maintained their position. The only communication I received from them was a Christmas card containing a family photo and a generic message that made no reference to our estrangement or its causes. I recognized this as their way of pretending nothing significant had happened, of attempting to normalize our relationship without addressing the fundamental breach of trust. I didn't respond. As the 1-year anniversary of my fateful surprise visit to Maple Street approached, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. Professionally, I was thriving with a growing investment portfolio and increasing responsibilities at work. Personally, I had built stronger relationships with friends who demonstrated respect for boundaries and reciprocity and support. I had even started dating someone who understood my family history without judgment. The most profound change, however, was internal. I had learned to trust my instincts when something felt wrong, to stand firm in the face of emotional manipulation, and to value honesty and respect above shallow harmony. I had discovered that family, real family, is defined by these values rather than merely by blood connection. This understanding didn't eliminate the occasional pangs of loss I felt, particularly around holidays or when passing a playground full of children who reminded me of my niece and nephew. It did, however, provide a framework for processing these emotions without falling back into unhealthy patterns. If asked a year earlier whether I would cut ties with my entire immediate family over a property dispute, I would have said absolutely not. But I now understood that the house had merely been the arena where deeper issues of respect, honesty, and mutual consideration had played out. The property wasn't the cause of our estrangement. It was simply the catalyst that revealed the true nature of our relationships. Looking toward the future, I remain open to genuine reconciliation based on mutual respect and accountability, but no longer feel compelled to maintain relationships that lack these fundamental elements, even with family. I've learned that sometimes the healthiest families are the ones we choose and build, rather than those we're born into. That might be the most valuable investment lesson of all. Recognizing when to cut losses and redirect resources toward healthier, more promising opportunities. Whether in real estate or relationships, sometimes walking away is the wisest path to growth. Has your family ever crossed boundaries that forced you to take a stand? What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for building a healthy life based on mutual respect. Thanks for listening, and I wish you strength in your own journey of establishing healthy relationships.